first, I heard there was mixed reviews. I actually, of course, I asked some questions afterwards as well. But I came away, the administration's on top of this. They're adapting as they need to, trying to allocate resources where they can be most effective. They said, when asked about $2.5 billion, is that adequate? Well, if it's not, as they said, we anticipate there being a CR, in which case there'll be another opportunity to increase. And this supplemental is for 2020. If there needs to be more money in 2021, we can give it there. So 3 bites at the apple, so to speak. So I don't think this is 2.5 million period, end of story. It's like, let's see how it evolves, and we can easily put more dollars in.
Was that their message, or was that the message?
They specifically said that. OMB specifically said that. What else?
Are you confident there is a strategy to deal with the sort of quarantine needs? There's a lot of concern, like sort of not in my backyard. You know, they don't.
I can't speak to the not in my backyard, but since they're putting them currently on military bases, typically, obviously that is an area to quickly isolate. That seems like, you know, that's effective. But one thing that was said, which is obvious, if it has now gone from China to South Korea to Iran, and there's cases elsewhere, but South Korea, they've increased the travel advisory to a level 3, and to Italy and Iran to a level 2, that it's going to spread. And ultimately it may get to our country. In fact, it probably will. The hope is that we can push it off as we learn its entry into our country until we have the resources by which to mitigate. And that would be both a vaccine, which is going into phase 1 trial, they said, in 2 months. That will be a year and a half until it's ready. But obviously, if it is available in a year and a half, that's really progress. I asked specifically afterwards about something called neutralizing antibodies. It goes back to when I did a lot of vaccines. But someone who's sick comes up with an antibody that fights the virus. And the virus enters the system, the antibody attacks it, and it prevents the virus from causing damage. Okay? China, they think, it's plausible, is looking at whether or not the patient who has the infection, who recovers, these antibodies can be taken and then used in someone who is newly infected. So you've recovered, you're newly infected, we take the antibodies from you, we give them to you that blocks the virus, and it protects you. So there is research taking place as we speak that has hope for a near-term solution. I feel like I'm back in med school.
What's near term, though, Senator?
I'm sorry?
What is near term, though?
Well,
6 months, a year?
Well, near term is an elastic term. But neutralizing antibodies, people who are recovering now have neutralizing antibodies. And we have the technology to take those antibodies and to either take them from patients who've recovered or to take those antibiotics and then reproduce them in the lab. So you can imagine that that would quickly, when I say quickly, within months, be a therapeutic option. There's some drugs which are showing promise as to their ability to fight the infection. China is obviously attempting to deploy those. From the headlines I read, they've taken a Gilead drug and they're attempting to use it. So I think the United States will benefit by the effort the Chinese, the Italians, the Koreans, and the Iranians are making to help us learn about the disease so that when it does come, we are better prepared.
Senator, why was this briefing classified?
They said at the end it didn't have to be classified. I think initially it was just, you know, kind of like house rules. But at the end, Joe Manchin said, why in the heck is this classified? And they said it doesn't need to be, which is why I'm speaking so freely.
Was there talk about drug shortages?
There was talk about drug shortages. There are supply chains in China, and there's a few drugs which are sole sourced in China. But so far, FDA said they have proactively contacted those companies, and as of now, there are no shortages. Now, there are drug shortages, but the drug shortages are unrelated to the supply chain issues because of Chinese geographic location.
So, Senator, as you stand here today, based on what you've heard, is the administration, are you confident they're prepared for a massive outbreak if it were to happen?
Well, a couple things. No one anticipates a massive outbreak soon. That the efforts that have been taken so far are preventing a massive outbreak as much as you can say that you're preventing, okay? But that the administration is agilely, if you will, responding. There was a good opinion piece or perspective in the New York Times by a physician a couple of days ago in which he speaks about the agility of the administration's response, yes, they've changed course, isn't that good. It means as our understanding has evolved, their response has evolved. It's a very good piece in the New York Times. I'd recommend you read it because I took it and thought, yeah, that's a great perspective.
So Americans should be heartened that there's a strategy
Yes.
in place.
Now, there's always a concern that things don't work out, but that's just life. On the other hand, I will say this administration, based upon what Congress has provided, they're very explicit. Congress in previous outbreaks has specifically provided certain resources that the administration is using in this situation for preparedness. And so we've learned from Ebola and from Zika and from MERS and SARS. And all that, by different administrations, not just this one, but different administrations, has come to a point where we're able to respond more effectively.